8 months ago yesterday, I requested unanimous consent to Senate Resolution 225, calling for a joint select committee of Congress to investigate the terrorist attack on our facilities in Benghazi, Libya, on September 11th, 2012, that resulted in the murder of 4 brave Americans: Foreign Service Officer Sean Smith, former Navy SEALs Glenn Dougherty and Tyrone Woods, and Ambassador Christopher Stevens, who was our first ambassador murdered while serving since Adolph Dubs in 1979. At the time, my colleague, the junior senator from California, objected on the grounds that the administration was trying, quote, to address Benghazi, and that President Obama would, quote, not rest until the perpetrators were caught. Madam President, here we are 8 months later. The perpetrators still have not been caught. And the confusion about what occurred on September 11th, 2012 in Benghazi has only gotten worse. In recent weeks, what happened in that terrible night has gotten more and more obscured. On April 2nd of this year, Mike Morell, the deputy director of the CIA during the Benghazi attacks, testified regarding the CIA talking points that he, quote, took out the word Islamic in front of extremist because he thought there were other kinds of extremists in Libya, and that he did not use the word terrorist because, quote, we see extremists and terrorists as the same thing. On April 29th of this year, in response to a FOIA request by Judicial Watch, the White House released emails related to Benghazi, including a September 14th, 2012 email from Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes that had as its stated, quote, goal, quote, to underscore that these protests are rooted in an internet video and not in a broader failure of policy. I would note that is a stated political goal from the White House in writing days after the attack, not to get to the truth, but to further that political goal. And then on May 1st, 2014, General Robert Lovell, Deputy Director of Intelligence of U.S. AFRICOM during the Benghazi attacks, became the first former military officer to question the administration's insistence that a rescue attempt was not possible, arguing, quote, the discussion is not in the could or could not in relation to time, space, and capability. The point is we should have tried. Madam President, it's hard to disagree with the good general that we should have tried to save those 4 Americans who were murdered that tragic night. We are left once again with persistent questions on Benghazi to which we still don't know the answers. Here are 10. 1, why was the State Department unwilling to provide the requested level of security to Benghazi in the summer of 2012? 2, do President Obama's daily intelligence briefings in the run-up to September 11th, 2012 support the assertion that there was no credible threat of a coordinated terrorist attack at Benghazi during the time? And do the daily intelligence briefings following that date support the claim the administration made that the cause was an internet video? And why hasn't the White House declassified and released those briefings, just like President George W. Bush did with his pre-September 11th, 2001 briefings? 3, why did we not anticipate the need to have military assets at the ready in the region on the anniversary of September 11th of all days? 4, did President Obama sleep the night of September 11th, 2012? Did Secretary Clinton? Neither has answered that very simple question. Were they awake or asleep while Americans were under fire? When was President Obama told about the murder of our ambassador? 5, if the Secretary of Defense thought there was, quote, no question that this was a coordinated terrorist attack, why did Ambassador Susan Rice, Secretary Clinton, and President Obama all tell the American people that the cause was a spontaneous demonstration about an internet video? None has squarely answered that question. 6, why did former Deputy CIA Director Mike Morrell edit the intelligence community talking points to delete the references to Islamic extremists and al-Qaeda? 7, why did the FBI not release pictures of the militants taken the day of the attack until 8 months after the fact? Why not immediately, as proved so effective in the Boston bombing? 8, why was Secretary Clinton not interviewed for the ARB report? And if all the relevant questions were answered in the ARB report, as our friends on the other side of the aisle often like to say, why did the State Department's own Inspector General office open a probe into the methods of that very report? 9, why have none of the terrorists who attacked in Benghazi been captured or killed? And 10, what additional evidence that the White House engaged in a partisan political campaign to blame the Benghazi attack on the internet video is contained in the additional emails requested by Judicial Watch, but withheld by the White House on the grounds that it would put a, quote, chill on internal deliberations? Madam President, I would suggest to my colleagues that what is truly chilling is that in the 20 months after the Benghazi attack, we have 4 dead Americans and no dead terrorists. It is chilling to think that our president may have had better things to do than personally attend to an ongoing terrorist attack on our people. It is chilling to imagine that we could have mounted a rescue attempt of our own people, but that we didn't even bother to try. It is chilling to think that our Secretary of State would not insist on giving an interview for the ARB report. It is chilling to think that we have an administration that is reluctant to utter the words radical Islamic terrorism, let alone fight effectively against it. And it is chilling to have former administration officials respond to questions in response to Benghazi with, quote, dude, that was like 2 years ago. Madam President, the clock is ticking. Memories are fading. It is beyond time to get the full resources of both houses of Congress behind this investigation. The president should release his daily intelligence briefings in the time surrounding the Benghazi attack, just as President George W. Bush did concerning 9/11. And this body should join with the House of Representatives with a joint select committee to get to the bottom of what happened, why we didn't protect Americans, why we didn't stop this attack, and why we haven't captured the terrorist who killed 4 Americans, including our ambassador. Accordingly, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the Rules and Administration Committee be discharged from further consideration and the Senate now proceed to S-Res 225. I further ask consent that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Madam President.
Senator from New Jersey.
Reserving the right to object. This request is, in my view, without merit. It's an effort to follow the footsteps of the unfortunate, politically motivated creation of just such a special committee by the House of Representatives just in time for midterm elections. Now, the supposed reason why, once again, we hear colleagues saying that we need to have another review, another hearing, another investigation, is the White House email. This is the smoking gun. When you read the email, and in fact, it is nothing more than a day-to-day work product and part of the job of the president's staff when they are talking about not Benghazi, but what is happening across the entire region, and clearly across many parts of the Arab world. What happened as it results to that video was a visceral response. And it is in that context that this email is being discussed. But our friends who will never be satisfied because it doesn't solve their political concerns, at the end of the day, seek to use this as their latest flame for their quote-unquote investigation. Their previous one-trick pony, repealing the Affordable Care Act, has finally been put out to pasture. The Republicans desperately need another political trick. And apparently, when there is nothing else of substance to fire up their base, their plan is to yell Benghazi as often and as loudly as possible. This request is, from my perspective, purely a political witch hunt without merit. There have been 11 congressional hearings on the attack. The executive branch has released 25,000 pages of documents and emails related to the incident. There has been an independent accountability review board report. There have been multiple congressional reports on the attack. The Senate Intelligence Committee issued a bipartisan report last January on the attack. The House Armed Services Committee issued a report on the military response to the attack. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which I chair, has held multiple hearings and briefings to review the events that occurred in Benghazi. We heard from Secretary Clinton. We heard from Secretary Kerry. We have heard from Deputy Secretary Burns. We have met with survivors of the Benghazi attack. We have had multiple briefings from Assistant Secretary Starr and with diplomatic security. We have had briefings from the intelligence community and the Department of Defense. Now, whatever questions remain are meant, from my perspective, only to score political points. I feel confident that the Congress and the American people have received the necessary information about the attack. But Congress is not without responsibility here. We also have an obligation to do our part to comply with the Administrative Review Board's recommendations. Benghazi again highlighted the need to maintain focus and to revise policies to better protect the nearly 70,000 men and women serving across the world in more than 275 posts. The Congress last took a serious look at this issue following another set of tragedies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam that resulted in 224 deaths, including 11 American citizens. Now, we may not be able to prevent every single terror attack in the future, but we can and we must make sure that our embassies and employees, starting with high-risk, high-threat posts, are capable of withstanding such an attack. That is why the Senate Foreign Relations Committee passed S. 1386, the Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, and Glenn Doherty Embassy Security Threat Mitigation and Personnel Protection Act of 2013. If the Senate wants to take effective action to safeguard our brave men and women serving in U.S. embassies and consulates abroad, if we want to actually be serious about discharging our duties and to make sure that these attacks are less likely to occur in the future, rather than grandstanding for cheap political advantage, then the Senate should take up S. 1386 and immediately pass it. A bipartisan bill that Senator Corker and I authored together with support from both sides of the aisle in our committee, authorizing funding for the key items identified by the Accountability Review Board on Benghazi, including embassy security and construction, language training, and an improved and integrated foreign service security training for State Department personnel. It provides contract authority to the State Department to allow it to award contracts on a best value basis rather than to the lowest bidder, where conditions required enhanced levels of security. And it goes on and on about our high-risk, high-threat posts, meeting all of the elements of what the review board said was critical to make sure that we don't lose lives again. So I would rather we legislate, which our constituents sent us here to do, and pass bills that strengthen our nation's national security posture and that address the real challenges and real lessons to be learned from the tragic events of Benghazi. And this bipartisan embassy security bill does just that. So for that purpose, I would ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 257 S1386, a bill to provide for enhanced embassy security. And further, the committee reported amendments be agreed to, the bill as amended be read a third time and passed, and the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection to the request made by the senator from New Jersey?
Madam President,
Senator from Texas.
reserving the right to object, I would note that my friend from New Jersey suggested that this is a request on the eve of a midterm election. The only reason for that, of course, is that 8 months ago, when I made the exact same request, the Democrats objected and blocked a joint select committee into Benghazi at that time. The senior senator from New Jersey also suggested that this was somehow to distract from Obamacare. I can promise you, there is no one in this chamber less interested in distracting from Obamacare than I. And indeed, I would encourage the senior senator from New Jersey, if he believes what he said, to go and campaign for his Democratic colleagues who are up for election this year with the simple message that he said on the floor of this Senate, which is Senator so-and-so was the critical 60th vote to passing Obamacare, and if you like it, you should keep your senator. I feel quite confident that the Democratic senators up for election this year are running as rapidly away from the point suggested by the senior senator from New Jersey as possible. But secondly, I would note in his entire speech, the senior senator from New Jersey said there's no need for any further inquiry because we've had lots of hearings, and there's no need to know anything. But let me point out, Madam President, the senior senator from New Jersey did not answer even a single question that I asked. I outlined 10 questions that have not been answered. He is the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and yet he either could not or did not answer even a single question, two simple ones, which are yes-no questions. Number one, did President Obama sleep on the night of September 11, 2012? The senior senator from New Jersey chose not to answer that, I suspect because none of us know, because the White House has never answered that question. Number two, do the president's daily intelligence briefings reflect the political spin from the White House at Benghazi? Likewise, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee did not answer that question. Again, I suspect it is because he does not know, because the White House has not released that information. There are far too many questions remaining. But the senior senator from New Jersey, my learned colleague, proposed a counter-unanimous consent request to improve embassy security. And Madam President, I would ask unanimous consent to engage in a very brief colloquy with my colleague and to ask him specifically one question about his unanimous consent request.
Is there objection? Without objection.
The question I would ask my colleague from New Jersey is, if I were to consent to the unanimous request that you have proffered, and if this side of the aisle were to request, would you likewise consent to the unanimous request that I put forward for a joint select committee composed of Republicans and Democrats in the Senate to get to the bottom of what happened in Benghazi?
Well, I would say to my colleague from Texas that the consent for embassy security, which passed in the committee in a bipartisan effort, is much different than a partisan effort to have an investigation that ultimately also led by a partisan effort in the House of Representatives. And so one is guaranteed to have the support of both sides of the aisle in order to ensure that we protect our men and women in the Foreign Service in the days ahead. The other one is guaranteed to pursue a political line and a political attack instead of making sure that we ultimately save lives in the future, not because I said it, but because the independent review board made these recommendations that we incorporated into law. So, of course, the same are not equivalent.
So Why is it, I am curious, that the senior senator from New Jersey believes an inquiry to ascertain the truth about what happened is necessarily a partisan endeavor? Is there no partisan interest on that side of the aisle into finding out what happened, how it could have been prevented, and why we didn't save those 4 Americans?
Well, you know, I'm happy to answer my colleague on that, because he suggested that his 10 questions, that because he makes the 10 questions, are suddenly worthy of being answered, worthy of, in fact, not being viewed through the prism of any politics. I would just simply say, if there is political spin, several of your questions were pretty shocking to me in terms of the political nature of it. There is, as I said to the body, we have had a whole host of efforts to review the facts and come to a determination of the truth of what happened in that day. They have been in public hearings, and they have been in secured intelligence briefings. Members on both sides have been exposed to it. Members on both sides got to ask questions across the spectrum. And so from my perspective, we have gone to the search of what happened on that fateful day. And we all abhor what happened to the men who lost their lives on that day. And that's why what I want to do is ensure that we lose no more lives as a result of this Congress's irresponsibility to act on embassy security, knowing what, in fact, a panel of experts, undisputed in their capacity, have said are necessary to protect our men and women around the globe. And yet we cannot seem to get that legislation passed through the Senate. Now, that is about congressional responsibility from my perspective.
I would note that my friend from New Jersey did not endeavor to answer any of the questions I proffered, including the most simple questions, such as, did the president sleep on the night of September 11th, 2012?
I think that whether the president slept or not on that day, the question is, did he even get told by those who had information that such an attack was going on? I don't know. The bottom line is that, would that have saved anybody? I don't know either. The bottom line is, do you want to do something about saving any future lives, or do you just want to do politics with this issue? If you want to save lives tomorrow, where you have the control at this moment, then you will let the embassy security bill go forward. If, God forbid, we have an attack somewhere in the world where the legislation that we are seeking in a bipartisan way in response to that independent board is stopped because the other side wishes to stop it, then God forbid that we have an attack and lives are lost, and then there will be an accounting at that time.
Well, I want to thank my friend from New Jersey for a powerful speech in support of this Joint Select Committee on Benghazi, because the Democratic senator from New Jersey, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, just told this body that he has no idea if President Obama was even told 4 Americans were under terrorist attack. He has no idea. He doesn't know what, if anything, the president could have done to save them. I would suggest that's exactly the reason we need this committee. If the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee 2 years later cannot answer that question, it makes abundantly clear that the response of the administration, and sadly the response of Senate Democrats, has been partisan stonewalling rather than trying to get to the truth. In the immortal lines of Jack Nicholson, it makes one think perhaps they can't handle the truth, or at least they don't want to know it. So I will finally say, I am more than prepared to consent to the request from the senior senator from New Jersey if he will only show the same reciprocal courtesy of agreeing to the same request for a joint committee, a bipartisan committee, a committee in which he could no doubt participate to answer the questions that the senior senator from New Jersey just told this body. He doesn't know if the president knew. He doesn't know what the president could have done. And apparently, The premise of the statements are that he doesn't think the American people care. I would suggest the American people care a great deal what the president knew about national security. If he wasn't engaged, if the people didn't know him, if he didn't act to stop it, that is a matter worthy of the inquiry of this body.
I would say to my colleague from Texas that we have come to a conclusion based on all of the hearings, all of the testimony, all of the reports as to what transpired and what we can do to save a life prospectively. And so therefore, I would say to the gentleman, he has it in his control to ultimately ensure that we set the foundation so that no one else will lose their life. If he wants to hold that hostage to his political efforts to continue an issue that has had thousands of hours of review, hearings, reports, all with bipartisan participation, then he can choose to do so.
Since my friend from New Jersey has made plain that he's not willing to consent to this request, I will note that this is an open offer, that any time my friend from New Jersey will simply stop blocking a fair, bipartisan joint inquiry into what occurred in Benghazi, that tragically a terrorist attack took the lives of 4 Americans, I'm happy to consent.
The time
to
for
his.
morning business has expired.
Is there objection to the request made by the senator from New Jersey?
Is there objection to the request made by the senator from New Jersey?
I object.
Objection is heard.
Is there objection to the request made by the senator from Texas?
Is there objection to the request made by the senator from Texas?
I object.
Objection is noted.